My phone broke into pieces as I hurled it against the wall. Tears blurred my vision, but I could still make out the email that had just destroyed everything I'd spent the last 5 years building. Regret to inform you that the board has voted unanimously to remove you from your position as Chief Operations Officer of Meridian Technologies, effective immediately. Robert Keller's name sat at the bottom of the message, his signature as polished and perfect as the lies he'd fed me for years. My mentor, my business partner, the man who promised me we would build something extraordinary together. And now, the man who had stolen it all. I sank to the floor of my empty apartment, surrounded by the broken pieces of my phone, much like the broken pieces of my life. 3 months ago, I'd liquidated my savings to invest in our expansion, trusting Robert's assurances that my position was secure. Last month, I'd ended my engagement because I was too focused on the company's future. And now I had nothing. No job, no savings, no relationship, no future. Just the cold, hard truth that I had been betrayed by the person I trusted most. "I will destroy you," I whispered to the empty room, the promise solidifying like ice in my veins. "Everything you love, everything you value, I will take it from you." I didn't know then how I would accomplish it. I only knew I would. And when the invitation to the annual Meridian Technologies Charity Gala arrived in my mail a week later, clearly sent before my unceremonious ousting, I recognized it immediately for what it was: opportunity. That's how I found myself standing across the ballroom from Lyra Keller, Robert's only daughter and greatest pride. 26 years old, brilliant, and recently returned from completing her PhD in London. I'd never met her before, only heard Robert's endless bragging about his extraordinary girl. She was striking, tall, and elegant in a midnight blue dress, with her father's piercing blue eyes but none of his calculating coldness. As she laughed at something someone said, I saw my path forward with perfect clarity. I would make Robert's daughter fall in love with me. And then, when the time was right, I would break her heart just as her father had broken mine. "Excuse me, but aren't you Nate Walker?" I turned at the sound of her voice, arranging my features into practiced surprise. Lyra Keller stood before me, studying me with curious eyes. "I am," I replied, extending my hand. "And you must be Lyra. Your father has spoken about you often." She took my hand, her grip firm and confident. The brief contact sent an unexpected current through my fingers, surprising me with its intensity. "All good things, I hope?" "The best," I said, offering a smile I didn't feel, though he failed to mention you were so perceptive. "Most people here are pretending I don't exist. Most people are idiots," she said bluntly, "and terrible at hiding their discomfort." I heard what happened. Dad doesn't know I'm talking to you right now. My pulse quickened. This was going to be easier than I thought if she was already rebelling against her father. "In that case," I said, lowering my voice, "perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere else? I'd hate to get you in trouble." A spark of defiance lit her eyes. "I'm 30 minutes away from delivering a speech about ethical leadership in technology. I think I can handle a conversation with a man my father refuses to discuss." I hadn't expected her directness. It was refreshing, even if it complicated my plans. "Fair enough," I conceded, "though I suspect Robert would prefer you get your information about me from him." "I prefer first-hand sources," she countered. "Besides, Dad and I don't always see eye to eye on business matters. Something about having my own mind seems to frustrate him." I couldn't help but laugh, genuine amusement breaking through my veneer of calculated charm. That sounds like Robert. He's not fond of perspectives that challenge his own. "Tell me about it," she said with a sigh. Her eyes lingered on my face for a moment longer than necessary, and I found myself noticing the slight dimple that appeared when she smiled. "Listen, I'm giving the speech in a few minutes, but would you be willing to meet for coffee sometime? I'd like to hear your side of what happened at Meridian. Off the record, of course." I studied her face, searching for signs of manipulation or ulterior motives, but found only open curiosity. Either she was an exceptional actress, or she was genuinely interested in my perspective. "I'd like that," I replied, suppressing the voice in my head, reminding me this was supposed to be my manipulation, not hers. "Though I'm surprised you want to hear anything I have to say. Lyra's expression turned serious. My father is brilliant at many things, but admitting his mistakes isn't one of them. And lately, she paused, looking around to ensure no one was listening. Lately, I've been questioning some of his decisions. Before I could respond, I spotted Robert across the room, his eyes narrowing as he noticed his daughter speaking with me. The murderous look on his face was almost worth the price of admission to this farce and event. "Your father has spotted us," I murmured, "and he doesn't look pleased." Lyra didn't even turn to look. "Good. Here's my card. Call me tomorrow and we'll set up that coffee." She pressed a business card into my palm just as Robert began moving toward us through the crowd. Her fingers lingered against mine for a heartbeat longer than necessary, the subtle contact leaving my skin tingling. With a final meaningful look, she walked away to prepare for her speech, leaving me to face Robert's approaching fury. As I slipped out a side door to avoid confrontation, I looked down at the card in my hand. My plan was in motion, but something felt off. I had expected to feel triumphant, but instead, I felt the first twinge of doubt. Lyra Keller was not what I had expected, and that made her infinitely more dangerous to my plans and to my heart. "So you're saying my father deliberately sabotaged the soul deal to force you out?" Lyra asked, her coffee cooling forgotten in front of her. 3 weeks had passed since the gala, and this was our 4th meeting. What had started as coffee had evolved into lunches, and now dinners. Each time, I told myself it was part of the plan, that I was simply laying groundwork, gaining her trust before I made my move. Each time, it became harder to believe my own lies. "I'm saying the numbers don't add up," I replied carefully. The projections we submitted to the board showed a clear pathway to profitability within 18 months. The numbers Robert presented the day I was voted out showed catastrophic losses. Someone changed those projections, and it wasn't me. Lyra ran a hand through her dark hair, a gesture I'd come to recognize as a sign she was deep in thought. "I can look into it. I still have access to most of the company's servers for my research project." "No," I said quickly, alarmed at the thought of her putting herself at risk. "That's not why I told you this. I don't want you compromising your relationship with your father." The irony of my statement wasn't lost on me. Wasn't that exactly what I had set out to do? "I'm not doing it for you," she said, her blue eyes sharp with determination. "I'm doing it because if what you're saying is true, then my father lied to the entire board and manipulated company data. That affects everyone at Meridian, including the research team I'm leading." I studied her face, trying to reconcile the woman before me with the pawn I'd intended her to be in my revenge. Lyra was principled, intelligent, and fiercely independent. Nothing like the spoiled, malleable dad's girl I'd imagined. "Just be careful," I said finally. "Your father doesn't respond well to challenges to his authority." "You don't need to tell me that," she said with a wry smile. "I've been challenging his authority since I was old enough to talk." Our conversation drifted to lighter topics. Her research in AI ethics, my plans to possibly start a new venture, our shared love of obscure indie films. When the bill came, I reached for it, but she was faster. "My turn," she insisted. "You paid last time." "I invited you," I protested, "and I accepted because I wanted to be here," she countered. "With you." The simple statement hung in the air between us, loaded with implications neither of us was ready to address. As we walked out into the crisp autumn evening, I offered her my jacket without thinking, an automatic gesture that felt simultaneously foreign and natural. "Thanks," she said, pulling it around her shoulders. She breathed in deeply, and I realized she was taking my scent from the jacket. "It smells like you," she said softly, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. My heart skipped a beat at the intimate observation. "Listen, I'm presenting my research at the Tech Summit next weekend. Would you want to come? As my guest?" The invitation was exactly what I had been working toward, a public appearance that would surely get back to Robert. It was perfect. So why did I hesitate? "I like that," I said finally. "But are you sure it's a good idea? Your father will be there." "All the more reason for you to come," she said with a challenging smile. "Besides, I want someone there who actually understands what I'm talking about. Dad just sees my work as a nice hobby until I come to my senses and joined the executive track at Meridian. As we said goodnight, she surprised me by leaning in to hug me. The scent of her perfume, something subtle with notes of vanilla and sandalwood, enveloped me as her arms wrapped around my shoulders. "I'm glad we met, Nate," she murmured, her breath warm against my ear, sending shivers down my spine, even if it was under less than ideal circumstances. I held her for perhaps a moment too long before pulling away. "So am I." As our eyes met, something electric passed between us, a current of unspoken possibility. For a breathless moment, I thought she might lean in closer, but instead, she stepped back, her eyes still holding mine. As I watched her walk to her car, the weight of my deception pressed down on me like a physical burden. My revenge plan had seemed so clear, so justified 3 weeks ago. Now, with every coffee, every conversation, every shared laugh, it became more muddled, more shameful. I was supposed to be making Lyra fall in love with me. Instead, I was dangerously close to falling for her. The tech summit was crowded with industry insiders, many of whom averted their eyes when they recognized me. 6 months ago, I would have been on stage presenting Meridian's latest innovations. Now, I was an outcast, a cautionary tale whispered about in corner conversations. But none of that mattered when Lyra walked onto the stage. She commanded the room with quiet authority, presenting her research on ethical frameworks for artificially intelligent decision-making systems with clarity and passion. I found myself genuinely captivated, not just by her, but by the ideas she presented. "The true test of any technology isn't what it can do," she concluded, her gaze sweeping the audience, "but what it should do. The question isn't whether we can build autonomous systems that make decisions for us, but whether we can build moral frameworks that ensure those decisions align with our highest human values." The applause was enthusiastic, and I joined in without reservation. As people began to mill about during the break that followed, I made my way toward the stage where Lyra was surrounded by attendees asking questions. Before I could reach her, a firm hand gripped my arm. "You have some nerve showing up here," Robert hissed, his voice low but venomous. "Haven't you done enough damage to my company?" I turned to face him, surprised by how little his intimidation tactics affected me now. "I'm here as a guest of Lyra. She invited me." His face flushed with anger. "Stay away from my daughter. Whatever game you're playing, it won't work. Have you considered that there's no game?" I replied calmly. Maybe I genuinely appreciate her work and her perspective. "I know you, Walker," he spat. "Everything is calculated with you. Everything is a means to an end." His words hit closer to home than he could have known. "You're confusing me with yourself, Robert," I said, pulling my arm free of his grip. "Not everyone operates the way you do." Before he could respond, Lyra appeared at my side, her professional smile faltering as she sensed the tension. "Dad," she said cautiously, "I see you found Nate." "Lyra, we need to talk," Robert said, his voice strained with forced pleasantness. "Privately." "Actually, Nate and I have lunch plans," she replied smoothly. She reached for my hand, her fingers intertwined with mine in a clear statement of allegiance. The unexpected gesture sent warmth radiating up my arm. Robert's eyes darted between us, clearly calculating his options. "Fine," he said finally, "but I expect you at the family dinner on Sunday. Don't be late." As he walked away, Lyra let out a breath I hadn't realized she was holding. "Well, that was awkward," she said with forced lightness. "Sorry about that." "Don't apologize for him," I said. "You were brilliant up there, by the way. Your research could revolutionize the field." Her smile returned, genuine this time. "You think so?" "Most people find the ethical implications boring compared to the technological capabilities." "Most people are short-sighted," I replied. "They don't understand that without ethical guardrails, even the most impressive technology can become dangerous." She studied me for a moment, her expression thoughtful. "You know, for someone my father describes as ruthlessly ambitious and morally flexible, you have a surprisingly strong ethical compass." I felt a stab of guilt at her words. If she only knew the real reason I had sought her out, would she still see me that way? "Your father and I see the world very differently," I said carefully. but I appreciate that you're forming your own opinions. As we headed to lunch, she kept her hand in mine, the simple contact feeling more intimate than any calculated move I'd planned. "You're different than I expected," she admitted as we walked. "When I first approached you at the gala, I thought I'd find someone bitter, hardened, but you're not like that at all." "Maybe I was," I said, the honesty surprising me. "Maybe I still am, sometimes. But when I'm with you..." I let the sentence hang, afraid of the truth it contained. She squeezed my hand gently. "When you're with me, when I'm with you, I remember who I wanted to be before all of this happened." I couldn't ignore the voice in my head pointing out the irony of my situation. I had set out to use Lyra as a pawn in my revenge against her father, only to discover she was fighting her own battle against the same man for very different reasons. And worse still, I was beginning to care about her fight more than my own. "I found something," Lyra said, her voice tense on the phone. "About the Soul deal. You were right." 2 months had passed since the tech summit. 2 months of dinners, long walks, deeper conversations. 2 months of me trying and failing to remind myself this was all part of my revenge plan. "Can you meet me?" she continued. "Not at any of our usual places. Somewhere private." We agreed on a small park near the river, far from the corporate district where we might be recognized. When I arrived, she was already there, pacing nervously along the waterfront. "These are the original projections," she said without preamble, handing me a flash drive. "And these are the ones presented to the board, the ones that got you fired." I took the drive, our fingers brushing momentarily. "How did you get these?" "It doesn't matter," she said, avoiding my eyes. "What matters is they're completely different documents. Someone rewrote the entire financial projection to make it look like the Soul expansion would bankrupt the company." I pocketed the drive. "Lyra, what are you planning to do with this information?" She finally met my gaze, her eyes stormy with conflict. "I don't know. He's still my father, Nate, despite everything." I took her hand, an instinctive gesture of comfort. "I understand. Whatever you decide to do, I'll support you." And I meant it, I realized with startling clarity. Somewhere along the way, my priorities had shifted. Revenge against Robert no longer seemed as important as protecting Lyra from the fallout of her father's actions. "There's more," she said quietly. "I confronted him about it last night." My heart sank. "What happened?" "He didn't deny it," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "He said sometimes difficult decisions have to be made for the good of the company, that you were becoming too influential, too popular with the board, that you were planning to push him out." "That's not true," I said firmly. "I know," she interrupted. "I told him I didn't believe that. And then She paused, collecting herself. "He threatened to cancel my research funding if I didn't drop it. Said it was time I learned how the real world works." Anger flared in my chest, hot and immediate. "He can't do that. Your research is funded by a grant, not by him personally." "The grant goes through Meridian," she explained. "He controls the purse strings." She looked out at the water, her profile sharp against the setting sun. "I always knew he could be ruthless in business, but I never thought he'd use my work as leverage against me." Without thinking, I reached for her, pulling her into an embrace. She resisted for just a moment before melting against me, her arms wrapping around my waist. "I'm so sorry," I murmured into her hair, breathing in her scent, feeling her heartbeat against my chest. "This isn't what I wanted." She pulled back slightly, looking up at me with confusion. "What do you mean?" The moment of truth had arrived sooner than I expected. I could continue to lie, press my advantage in her moment of vulnerability, or I could tell her the truth and almost certainly lose her. "When I approached you at the gala," I said slowly, "it wasn't by chance. I wanted to hurt your father through you, to make you fall for me, and then..." I couldn't finish the sentence, shame choking the words before they could escape. Lyra stepped back, her expression shifting from confusion to dawning comprehension to hurt. "You used me," she said flatly. "All of this, the coffee dates, the dinners, the conversations, it was all to get back at my father?" At first, yes, I admitted, hating myself with each word. But Lyra, somewhere along the way, everything changed. What I feel for you now is real. She laughed bitterly. And I'm supposed to believe that? How convenient that your feelings changed just as I discovered evidence that could help restore your reputation. This isn't about the evidence, I insisted. I don't care about that anymore. I care about you. I've fallen in love with you, Lyra. I never meant to, never wanted to, but I did. Save it, she said, her voice cold. You're just like him, you know that? Different methods, same ruthless core. You both see people as pieces to be moved around for your own benefit. Each word struck like a physical blow because I knew she was right. I had been exactly that person when I set my plan in motion. You're right, I said quietly. That's who I was. But loving you has changed me, Lyra, and I do love you. I love the way your eyes light up when you talk about your research. I love how you stand up to your father without flinching. I love your courage and your brilliance and even your stubbornness. I love all of you, and I know I don't deserve you. The words hung in the air between us. The first time either of us had spoken them aloud. For a moment, I thought I saw her expression soften. But then she shook her head. I need time, she said finally. Time away from you, from my father, from all of this. I understand, I said, even as my heart contracted painfully in my chest. But please, before you go, what will you do about the evidence? She looked down at the flash drive in my hand. Keep it. Do what you want with it. Restore your reputation. Destroy my father's, whatever your end game is. I don't want any part of it anymore. And with that, she walked away, leaving me alone with the evidence I wanted so desperately just months ago, but which now felt hollow in my hand compared to what I had just lost. 3 weeks passed without a word from Lyra. I tried calling once, but the call went straight to voicemail. I didn't try again, respecting her request for space even as her absence tore at me. I spent those weeks reflecting on the person I had become in my quest for revenge, calculating, manipulative, willing to use an innocent person as collateral damage. The realization sickened me. On the first day of winter, I made my decision. I packaged up all the evidence Lyra had gathered, along with a full account of what had really happened with the Soul deal, and sent it not to board directors, as I had once planned, but to a trusted financial journalist with a reputation for integrity. 2 days later, the story broke. By nightfall, Meridian stock had plummeted, and the board had called an emergency meeting. Robert Keller's manipulations had been exposed not by me, but by his own actions documented meticulously in company records. I took no pleasure in his downfall, as I once thought I would. Instead, I worried about Lyra, about how she was coping with seeing her father's disgrace splashed across every business publication. That evening, as snow began to fall over the city, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, Lyra stood there, snowflakes melting in her dark hair. I saw the news, she said simply. I'm sorry. I replied, meaning it. I know he's still your father. Did you release the evidence? I nodded, not to harm him, but because it was the right thing to do. The investors, the employees, they deserved to know the truth. She studied me for a long moment before speaking again. I talked to the journalist who broke the story. She said you specifically requested that my name be kept out of it entirely, that you took full responsibility for gathering the evidence. You didn't need to be dragged into this, I said. Your work is too important. Why did you do it? She asked. After everything, why protect me? Because I love you, I said simply. Not as part of some plan. Not as a way to hurt your father. I just love you, Lyra. Every day, without you these past weeks, has been empty. I've missed your voice, your laugh, the way you challenge every assumption I make. I've missed you, and I'm so sorry for how this all began. She stepped forward, closing the distance between us. When I walked away that day, I was so angry, not just at you, but at myself for not seeing through you, for falling for you despite all the warning signs. Her voice softened, for loving you even when I knew I shouldn't. My heart leapt at her words. You love me? Against my better judgment, she admitted, a small smile breaking through her serious expression. I tried not to. I tried to hate you. But every time I remembered something terrible about how we started, I also remembered a dozen moments that felt real. I never deserved your trust. I admitted. No, you didn't, she agreed. But people can change. I've seen it happen. She took a deep breath. My father called me today after the story broke. Do you know what he said? That he was sorry. In all my life, I've never heard him apologize to anyone. I didn't know what to say to that, so I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. Sometimes, she said thoughtfully, it takes losing everything to recognize what truly matters. She reached for my hand, her touch sending warmth through me despite the cold. I'm not saying I forgive you completely, but I'm willing to try. Because I love you too, Nate. And I want to see if what we have is strong enough to overcome how it began. I pulled her closer, one hand gently cupping her face. I promise you, no more lies. No more schemes. Just us, and whatever we can build together. I want to believe that, she whispered, her eyes searching mine. Then believe this. I said, I love you, Lyra Keller. I think I've loved you since that first night at the gala, when you weren't afraid to speak to the pariah in the room. And I'll spend every day proving that to you, if you'll let me. She smiled, the tension finally leaving her shoulders as she leaned into my touch. I'm going to hold you to that promise. As snow continued to fall outside, Lyra stepped into my apartment, bringing with her the promise of a new beginning, one based not on revenge, but on redemption and the fragile hope of real love born from the ashes of deceit.